We had fabricated a mock-up front wing before to check on wheel clearances. We were happy with wheel clearances, we've made the decisions on that, but we also concluded that we needed an alternative way. We needed to make something that was more of a book, if you like, and more of a shape assessment for the detail on the wheel arches. We got some conclusions on the major shape of them and how we were going to go about doing it. We've got various ideas on how we were going to go about doing it. And as I say, we worked out the clearances, but what we weren't sure about was the detail. Certainly, like the mid part of a wing, it's easy to determine like the overall shape of that section. What's hard is the way it blends into the surrounding panels, the shape here, the shape around a wheel arch. I mean, it's not perfect on here. This is just a foam mock-up, but getting the exact detail of an arch lip, you can't really do without actually making it out of something in the meantime, and the way the panels blend out into the surrounding panels. All of those things really need some sort of fairly detailed mock-up stroke book. So Cal's been working on basically knocking up this lot out of insulation board, foam, filler, various other materials to come up with a shape that I can then get profiles from to start making the actual steel panels. And we're pretty much there. We're very, very close. He's got to do a little bit more work on the back, but it's very, very close to being good enough now to get the profiles from for us to make the steel panels from. It doesn't need to be 100% there to be able to get the profiles from. It just needs to give us the rate of change of something like the arch lip going around, and what its major shape is, say there. We can do stations with profiles, say there, and then we'll do another one there, and we'll do it radially around the wheel arch, all the way across the panel, do stations to get profile changes. And anywhere where there's a rapid change in profile or a fade out, we'll do sections tighter together. Then I can paper pattern the whole panel, and then when I start shaping the panel, I've got those station templates to use as references to see that I've got the actual shape correct. I can do the longitudinal shapes using sweep sections, which I was just sorting out the other day as well. We can use a longitudinal profile to make sure that the overall curvature is right. And anywhere where, as I say, where there's detail that we're not too, where it's quite difficult to get right, we can make closer sections, or even actually we even trial the panel over bits of this. That's certainly the way we're going to proceed. So we've done half the car like this. It means that then when we do the stations from this, we can mirror those to do the panels the other side of the car. So that gets us pretty close now to the actual shape of what we're going to be making. I'm actually now there's a couple of other things, but one of the key things is I'm actually waiting on another bit of kit. We need a more powerful piece of machinery for shrinking. So it's a problem we've had for a little while. We've worked around it for a long time, but decided we really need to bite the bullet and get a more powerful shrinker, because shaped like this, your choices are to do it all on the wheel and break the panel up into quite a number of pieces, or break it up into less pieces, do it in bigger sections, but then you need to do more shrinking, particularly on a section like this, where there's no way you can wheel all of the shape into that, because the material ends up very, very thin in the middle. So you do need to do shrinking around the outside, and there's a limit with the small foot-operated shrinkers, how much shrink you can apply around the edge of a shape like that. You just can't thicken the material enough to pull it in enough. So I'm waiting on a bit of kit for that. Scott, in the meantime, on the same car, has been busy on the inside. I guess there's not much point me trying to show you on the inside, but he's been busy panelling in the centre tunnel. He's finished off quite a lot of panel work on that. And lots and lots of finishing off metalwork on the inside. He's also done, we'd started last week, but he's now finished the seatbelt mounting reinforcers, because of where we've added these cars weren't equipped with seatbelts originally. We've added seatbelts in, but we didn't want to add visible structure into the car. The idea being it is a road car, it's not having a full roll cage in it, it's not having harnesses in it because they're a pain for road use. So we wanted to make some structurally safe seatbelt mountings that didn't add any glaringly ugly parts to the inside of the car. So he's made, well, I drew them up and cut the parts on the plasma, then Scott's made them and fitted them. Some reinforcers that go inside the quarter panels that pick up the shoulder mounting for the seat belts inside the top part of the quarter panel and add a lot of stiffness to the quarter, because the quarters on these cars are not very strong, and they can bend inwards and outwards relatively easy. Under crash forces, they'd be able to bend inwards quite a long way, which isn't something you'd want. So we've added a stiffener that basically prevents that happening, and also adds vertical stiffness to the panel and spreads the load into the rail under the rear window. So it adds a lot of strength into that area in the shell, and it ties the shoulder mounting of the seat belt down into the actual inertia reel mounting, which will be going onto the top of the sill structure. So it ties all that lot together really well. We're also on the final stages of just measuring up. I've got a rough drawing in CAD. We've just got to tie up the final dimensions for the fuel tank. Then that can go away to get made. Well, we'll get Concept Racing to make that. And we can also get a fuel filler, get that fitted, sorted out. We're also just planning various parts of the brake system. We've got the pedal box in. We've got to put the servos in. We're using remote servos on it, and we've just been working out where a little space for the remote servos, making sure that they're all going to fit in the space available. And Cal's also been working on the in-car entertainment system, which is sort of developing at the moment, and working out the details of the spec on that and ordering parts for that as well, so we can do the final fixings for those. And also finally the plumbing routing, which also ties into the braking system, the fuel system, working out the fuel pipe routings, putting in riv nuts. Well, we won't put the riv nuts in, but we'll put the holes in for the riv nuts, and weld studs in various places. We'll be putting spot welded studs in to carry fuel lines. So that's all developing as well. And the final part, Stu is now working. We've pinched Stu from the Mustang for a little bit, because he's at a point where he's waiting for a couple of things on the Mustang. So we've pinched Stu, and he's doing the dash modifications in the Morris. The lower dash we're adding a section to the lower part of the dash, which is also going to form part of the centre console. All very in keeping with the style of the car. It's nothing garish and nothing too modern looking, but it's going to give us somewhere to mount extra things that we need to mount in the car. It's also going to give us somewhere to hide part of the heater behind. And also tied into that, Stu's also making the mountings for the HVAC unit, because it's having heating and air conditioning. And one of my next jobs is then going to be to sort out the mountings for the aircon compressor, and just finishing off a few other bits. I've got to finish the CAD for the engine to gearbox adapter, because we've got to change. There's part of that that's going to be changed, so I've got to do that. And sort out the mountings for the aircon compressor. So yeah, lots of progress. We've had quite a few pairs of hands on this week, and it's moved a long way. So yeah, it's imminently going to be on its wheels on the ground for a little trial. So that should be good. Yeah. Ah yes, Jamie's just reminded me from behind camera. One of the other things, which I should know because I've been doing it, we've been working on the boot hinges. One of the other stipulations by the car's owner, was that the hinges needed to be non-visible on the bonnet and the boot. I'm trying to it sounds easier than it actually is. The boot lid needs to open a long way on a Morris, as I've discovered trying to work this out yesterday. That because the car will be very low to the ground, and the boot lid's already in quite a closed position when it's shut, it's very low when it's shut. It needs to open it needs to open an enormous way so you can actually see it into the boot. If you only open it sort of a typical sort of maybe 70 degrees or so, you still can't get into the boot. So it kind of needs to open sort of over 100 degrees, probably more. So my initial idea was to use a 4-link linkage, a scissor linkage for the hinges, and mount them on the sides so that the boot lid would clear its aperture and open in a sensible fashion. But it's no good. I can't get enough opening with that geometry and have it clear everything it needs to clear. So we're now using a more conventional type of hinge mounted to the inside. But the problem, my initial reluctance to do that, was that the hinges were going to clash with the top of the fuel tank. Now, as it is, by the time I got the filler arrangement in, the top of the fuel tank's a little bit lower than I'd envisaged. And with a bit of head scratching and backwards and forwards yesterday, we've worked out that we can do a shaped hinge that will clear the seal gutter around the boot, and I can mount to a reasonable piece of structure inside the boot that will actually give us the huge opening, almost vertical opening that we need on the boot lid, and not interfere with the fuel tank. So we've got a solution. I'm just in the midst of drawing it, but I've kind of swapped off that to move on conveniently to something we're going to touch on in a minute. But I think that rounds everything up for the Morris. There's quite a lot to remember on that, and I don't have a very good memory, so but we'll move along.
So, moving on, the Morris. We were looking at, I think that was mainly looking at the exterior bodywork that we were modelling last week, but now we've moved on to doing the interior and the changes to the dash specifically. So, there's always been a proposed change to the dash, and now we've been actually putting that into place. The main reasons for this are we're having aircon on this car, so there's a vintage air heater and aircon unit back here. We've used these on quite a lot of projects, and they're a great solution. They just give you quite a modern experience in terms of the climate control. So you've got servo-controlled air direction change between demist, face vents and foot vents, servo-controlled temperature control, so the dials are just a nice little potentiometer, and they feel really nice to use. So we've got one of those in there, and obviously because of the size of the unit, although it's extremely compact for heating and aircon unit with all of that functionality, it still needs some extension of the dash to cover that. And we also wanted to extend the dash down so that the column was coming through the dash and not hanging down below it. We also wanted somewhere to put some air vents, because originally on these you have the demist vents, but you don't actually have a directional air vent for your face. And we wanted somewhere to put the stereo. Now, the owner of this wants a CD player, which actually in this day and age is quite a rarity. But he wants a CD player, which means you need a reasonable space to put a traditional CD player in there. So kind of combining all those elements together, we came up with this nice shape which Stu's made in steel. It rolls up slightly at the ends to sort of echo the original shape of the dash there. Nice radius under here which rolls all the way around. And when we're finished with this, the plan to try and break it up a bit visually is that the top part of the dash, the original bit, will be painted body coloured, and then the lower part will be upholstered in leather. And that will allow us some details as well. So we'll have a French seam that runs around this corner here all the way around. And I think once that's all come together, it's going to look really good. We're going to delete some of these switch holes here will all go, and there'll be a console built down here around the gear shifter that's going to have most of the switch gear, which is actually not a lot because there's so much on the column that we're using. The additional switch gear is going to be electric windows, the climate control controls, which will also be down here, and not a lot else, to be honest. We may put a start button here, I think, and then we're going to have a speedo traditional instrument that sits in here, which is speedo but also a rev counter, and we'll have the additional information like engine temperature and oil pressure built into that. The vents are Mercedes SLK vents, which we've used before. In fact, they're on Kaiser 1. They're just a really attractive vent and got a nice motion where you rotate this to open and close the vent, and obviously you can aim it by moving it around. So that's looking really good.
Moving on, the Morris has progressed a bit since last week. Stu's just finished off the dash now. So that's now ready. It's had the vents mock-up fitted, the sleeves inside which the vents slide into and lock into. That's done. The final alignment of the stereo's been set up, and that's all done. Clearances on the tunnel are all set. The heater mountings are done, and the plan is all finalised for the routing of the ducts, and the general finishing has all been carried out all the way around. All the welds have been dressed, so that's now ready for the next steps. Basically all the prep prior to trimming, and probably a few more brackets adding on, that sort of thing. The heaters, the mock-up heater unit, which is just over there, that's been taken back out. The proper heat, it was actually also mocked up with a full heater unit, just to make sure, because the mock-up unit's not got quite some of the detail on it. So it was also trial fitted with the actual heater unit that's going in it, just to make sure that all the pipe routings work out well. So that's all good.
So, the Morris, and this is one everybody's been asking about, of course, because we stopped for a while on it for a couple of reasons, really. We were at the point where we needed to do the front wings, and that was a job I really wanted Stu on, and Stu was finishing up all the loose ends on the Camaro metalwork. So we basically just paused on it while we were finishing off the Camaro, but Camaro metalwork's now done. So we're back on this. I think Stu managed to squeeze a couple of days in before Christmas, I think. And now we'll be on it solidly, so you should see some pretty good progress on this. Whoa, I'm knocking things over. So previously you saw that we'd modelled a revised wing shape and front end shape in foam, and it's literally just clagging insulation board on there and expanding foam to build up the areas where we knew we wanted to build it up wider, and then I spent a while literally just manually sanding that foam back until we'd got to a shape that we were happy with. We'd previously done a mock-up steel wing on the other side to allow us to check for how wide the wing needed to be to get wheel clearance, because obviously with the foam in there you can't actually get the wheel up in the arch. So once we were happy with all of that, over to Stu to work his magic, and he's been doing exactly that. So this wing section is pretty much done. That one, I think he's made the two sections. He might not have welded the two together. It's made in two halves, which are joined down here. A lot of English wheel work and a lot of shrinking work. You might have also seen in the tool tour that Nat did just before Christmas. He was excitedly enthusing about the shrinker that he'd built with the pneumatic cylinder on it. And one of the reasons we wanted to get that is because we knew when we were doing these wings there was going to be an enormous amount of shrinking to do. And it was going to be pretty tedious and difficult with the small shrinker that we used to have. So yeah, a lot of work on the shrinker, a lot of work on the English wheel. But actually it came together pretty well. Stu's now working on the front end. It's going to be a centre section that's actually separate to the wings. There'll be a flange on this tube here, and that central section will bolt through to that flange, and there'll also be an inward flange on the front of this wing section here, so you end up bolting all three flanges together. Stu's just been making this last section of the wing here, so effectively that whole wing will be in 3 new sections plus the original section. But all of those sections eventually will be cut flush and butt welded together, so it effectively looks like one piece metal panel. So really happy with how that's going, actually. Subtle change on the bonnet that we're doing as well, I nearly forgot to mention. We wanted to just bring the front edge of the bonnet down slightly more at the sides to give it a slightly more of an upward curve. And then we were scratching our heads yesterday still about where we were going to put the swage. We wanted something to define this area around the intake a bit. Not necessarily all the way around, but something. And then we were looking at how we would transition that swage into the bonnet, which is just a smooth curve originally. But then we realised that this swage line that runs down the centre here comes around and actually fades out around here. So we came up with the idea of carrying that swage along, dropping it along with the revised curve on the front of here, and then carrying it onto that wing section, and then tapering it out on the corner there, which I think will work very well. It's certainly looking good so far. So excited to see all that lot come together. It is looking amazing. It's a very difficult car to get right cosmetically, because there's such an iconic look originally, and to widen it pretty substantially without making it look like you've tacked kind of cobbled up trailer arches onto it can be quite a challenge. So I'm aware that it's a tall order to make this look good. I'm hoping we're managing that.
Stu's been busy on the Morris. The front end, which you saw started last time, Stu had started the near side wing. He'd done the majority of the work on the near side wing last week, and he'd probably done 80% of the front panel last week as well. He's now finished the front panel, finished the shaping of the near side wing. He hasn't actually finished the near side wing, I'll come on to that in a minute. And he's now started he's probably done 80% now of the work on the offside front wing, as you can see. that's the next step really on that. He's pretty close to the stage. He was doing a bit of reshaping down here this morning, and there's various bits of shaping still needed, and there's bits of work required. But basically, one of the next tasks is then going to be grafting the new section onto the original wing. That gives it a bit more rigidity to work with, and then it'll be then titivating the fit and adjusting the fit elsewhere. And then that's where there's quite a long slog of work on both of these wings, which is tapping and filing. Basically, hammer and dolly over the entire wing, leveling up high and low spots and getting a smooth finish, and then basically filing the wing to get a level finish all over. So the tapping and filing process on all of those front sections will take quite a while. There's quite a bit of work in that. But what we're going to do is, once they're at the grafted on correct shape stage, then Stu's going to move on to the rear wings at that point and set to working on the rear wings, so we can get them to this sort of stage, and then he'll move back onto the front. Gives them a bit of a break, because once you've stared at the same panels for quite a long time, you start to go colourblind. You know, you get the sort of white blindness, and you can't see your way through really. So he's going to move on to the back, do the rear shaping on the rear wings, then he'll move back to the front of the car, do the tapping and filing on the front, and then he'll move back to the back again and do the tapping and filing on the back. That's the plan as it stands anyway. So yeah, very pleased with progress on that. It's really coming together. The shape, the initial shape was as sort of determined in the foam and filler. Looks really good in steel on the car. So we thought it would, but you never quite know until it's in the steel, and we're happy with that now. It's interesting as an aside to that. Kind of tying into Utah really on the Jaguar front, is that it was fairly well known at the time that Sir William Lyons, when he directly controlled Jaguar, would only approve car designs in steel. A lot of car manufacturers kind of in that period did design approval at a clay stage or in the earlier design stages. At Jaguar, they often didn't, I believe anyway, didn't use clay modelling early on in the process. They basically did the drawings, and they did lit drawings and drawings with the shadow and the light lines in and the shadow lines in to get an initial idea, and then they moved on and and from that they made a book and did a steel body for design approval. They kind of jumped all the full-scale clay stage and went straight to a steel design, in that they knew that William Lyons wouldn't approve the design unless it was in steel. So it's an interesting tie-in there, that actually it's not a new thing doing an initial design in steel. It's just that it's a bit easier if you work from a book. On this, we've worked from foam on one side, and then Stu's profile from the far side mirrored all the profiles to get the shape this side, which is quite difficult. It's quite challenging, and yeah, I think he's nearly had enough of that front wing now. So he'll be glad to get to the stage he's at, because it is quite brain taxing doing that mirroring of each profile and working out where your errors are from one side compared to the other. So at that point, you kind of wish you had a book, but the hours spent on the book still don't offset the time saving of doing the mirroring. So it's horses for courses. So we'll mosey along here. The last time Stu was working on the front end metalwork, which the sort of bulk of the roughing out work is all done on that. So he's moved on to the rear, which is taking shape pretty nicely. I think this week he's done the bulk of the metalwork on this rear wing. A few little tweaks still to do. I'm not totally happy with the shape here. It's not quite the same as the one that we modelled on the other side. But the gist is just really exciting to start seeing that overall wing shape coming together in the steel. So we're going to do some tweaks on that. Stu's off today, but when he's back, he's going to do some tweaks on that and get the other side done. And then I think the moment we've all been looking forward to on this is that at that stage we can actually get it off the jig and drop it onto its wheels, which is the first time we're really going to get to see that car in all its glory at normal height that you'll actually see it from, because it's all very well sort of seeing all the body shape change, but when it's sat up miles in the air like this, you don't quite see it from the angle you're going to see it from eventually. In here, we'll pause a moment for, this is the armrest that goes on the seat. There's a folding armrest, we mentioned it last time, that we're making for the seat on Project Utah.
So that's now being fabricated. So essentially it's a fabricated steel piece. There's a phosphor bronze bush inserted in each side. There's a very large shoulder bolt that goes through here and bolts into the assembly that's attached to the seat frame itself. And then a little wavy washer in there that sets an amount of preload, so that the armrest doesn't just flap up and down. It's got some resistance, but likewise you can still move it. And then there's a machine disc which was through there. I didn't show you, but I'm sure we've got some footage of it, which sits against here and actually sets the limit, so the fully down position and the fully up position. So the next step with this is it'll have 10mm foam. Well, it'll be painted first, then it'll have 10mm foam put around it, which brings the level up to the level of this piece, and then that'll be upholstered in leather and become part of the seat. Nat wanted me to mention, Stu's been doing a lot more work on the Morris now, and one of the last things he's been doing is using this air planishing hammer, this Senga hammer, which Nat will probably mention more of in a future episode. But it's a proper old school bit of kit which he's acquired recently, which he really loves, which was designed originally, I believe, for doing repairs on wings where you needed to form out damage, crash repair damage, and you needed to be able to get all the way around the wing, both sides. But consequently, it's really handy for those sorts of situations on a car as well, where you want to try and do panel work on it with everything in place, and that's what Stu's been working on. So this rear wing, I think he was just starting it last week, and we had a little bit of a revision. So we decided that that back corner there just wasn't quite as it was on the side we sculpted in foam. So we revisited all of that section, got all that to a point where we were happy with it. He's now put this little swage and the return lip on it, and just now he's been working on all of this corner area here. But yeah, a lot of this is English wheelwork, but where that Senga hammer came in real handy was, with all of this in place, it enables him to planish sections like this area here, where we wanted to add a little bit more crown to it, with it actually in situ on the car. And it's a great way to do that. But as I say, Nat will go into that tool in a bit more detail in future. So yeah, I think we're just finishing off this area here. There's various little details to just iron out, little lines to crisp up a bit, and the lips need trimming. And then I think that arch is pretty much there. And I think with those tweaks done now, we're really happy. I actually was standing the other side of the workshop earlier and looked over and said to the guys, wow, this car looks awesome from every angle. And you know, you're really critical of your own work normally, and when you glance at a car and keep seeing it and thinking, wow, that looks good, it's always a good sign that you're on the right path. So yeah, it's going to be doing the same on that side now, and then that will be the arches complete, and we'll get this off the jig and see it on the deck.